In its glory days, the President's House was one of the finest examples of British colonial architecture in the Caribbean. Once the seat of a plantation estate house during slavery, the neoclassical building has served as a governor's residence, a museum, and art gallery, and the home of the president. It stands empty today, awaiting urgently needed restoration. The President's House stands on a property which was first purchased by the French-Swiss Péchier family in 1783 through the Cedula of Population. It was here that they established the Paradise Sugar Estate and the St. Anne's Estate Plantation House. The sugar plantation, which was worked by enslaved people, occupied most of what we now know as St. Anne's and the Queen's Park Savannah. In 1817, heirs of the Péchiers sold Paradise Estate to the colonial government under Sir Ralph Woodford. The rest of the property was laid out into the Royal Botanical Gardens, and the old estate house became the colonial governor's mansion.
And when the estate was converted away from sugarcane into a public space for the savannah and then the Royal Botanical Gardens, very little survives of that period. So it is easy to forget what Paradise Estate was and what it stood for, and that people lived and died there. We also forget the long legacy of slavery associated with Paradise Estate. There were slaves owned by the colonial government at that point in time. They were fairly well treated in comparison, and only in comparison, to what the life of a plantation slave was.
In the 1840s, Governor Lord Harris decided to replace the estate house with a smaller, more manageable structure that became known as the cottage. The building sprawled over a large area of land, but it was just one story high with wide open verandas on all sides. By the 1870s, Trinidad had grown into a significant British colony, strategically and commercially, and with a sugar industry that was prospering.
So it was a wealthy colony, a colony on the up and up. So it was felt necessary that there should be a proper grand residence. And the house was built in the 1870s. It was opened in 1876. The first governor to live in it, I believe, was Sir Henry Irving.
The house, which was designed by Mr. Ferguson, was styled on the architecture of the British Raj. The facade of the house was made of blue Laventil limestone, and the roof was Welsh Duchess slate. The railings and columns were done in a Victorian style, while the doorways and open loggias are Italian in influence. The garden's plants and flowers were imported from around the world. Construction cost £44,630, and on completion it was considered one of the grandest state residences in the Caribbean.
The new governor's mansion was the place to be and the place to be seen. And an invitation to a ball at the governor's house was considered to be the epitome of society, and it actually raised one's social status a little every time you were invited.
In 1938, the building was almost completely gutted by fire, but this provided an opportunity to modernize the interior. The house remained the residence of the colonial governors of Trinidad until 1958. Governor General Lord Hales occupied the building from 1958 to 1962 during the short-lived Federation of the West Indies, and the house was briefly used as a museum and art gallery. In 1965, it became the residence of the Governor General once again.
And then it was refurbished for the Governor General of independent Trinidad and Tobago, And it became President's House, of course, in 1976, exactly 100 years after it opened, when we became a republic. And Sir Ellis Clark, the first president, continued to live there. He had lived there as Governor General, and he continued to live there.
Signifies the President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago.
I, Ellis Emmanuel Innocent Clark.
In addition to being the president's private residence, the house was used for diplomatic receptions, national awards, and swearing-in ceremonies. It was occupied by the President of the Republic until 2010, when disaster struck.
Lack of maintenance, the fact that because of the leaking roof, the stonework was saturated with water and disintegrated. In addition, the roof structure in wood was termite-ridden. So, everything worked against it staying in place. And at that point, it just collapsed.
The collapsed section of the roof was covered by a temporary roof. However, 4 years later, the building remains unrestored.
We must do all that is within our power to ensure that it is preserved and it is renovated in a manner that would keep its history while making it habitable once again.
Part in the building's significance to our country is that despite its colonial roots, it was local labor and craftsmen that worked on it.
It's Trinidadian build those buildings. And what we have to show the generation that come in, for them to see, well, listen, this is the contribution that the older men or our foreparents did. So they would appreciate what they see now. But what about the work that you leave or the things that you do? That I could afford to tell my children or my grandchildren, listen, I work at President House, I did so and so and so, look the building there. What did I have now for I to show my son or my grandson when those buildings gone?
The President's House is an intrinsic part of our cultural identity and our heritage as a people. It stands not only as a symbol of our colonial past, but as one of Trinidad's birth as a republic. An iconic feature around the savannah, its restoration would preserve the many stories its walls can tell.